Hey, I'm Trey. Today's story is about a killer that frustrated the authorities so much that the police paid the killer to help locate his murdered victims. The killer was also rewarded for the service by receiving a pension for the work done. This is like a slap in the face for all the victims and their surviving family members. If you enjoy more stories about serial killers spanning different countries and time periods, then this is the channel for you. Please leave any comments or suggestions in the comments section. Well, if you're ready, let's get started. November 1980, in the country of Canada, a young girl by the name of Christina Weller resided in a motel park approximately 15 miles out of Vancouver. Christine was 12 years old at the time and was a happy-go-lucky tomboy that had plenty of friends and enjoyed spending time with them. She did this by going to the local mall to hang out with them. Because they all lived in a suburban area, most of the neighborhood children were known to hang out at the mall for entertainment. This particular day was a school day, and one of her friends asked if she would want to meet them at the mall after school. Christine agreed and met with them at the mall. After several hours of roaming the mall and hanging out with friends, she realized that she overstayed her time. Christine knew that she needed to make it home by 5 p.m. to prevent being late for supper. Christine would have been punished by not being allowed to go back to the mall on a later date if she would have returned home late. She came up with the idea of borrowing a friend's bicycle in order to race home in time. She asked each one of her friends individually if she could borrow one of their bicycles. This was to avoid being late for supper and being punished for it. Initially, they all told her no. They clowned around with her for a bit, and one of them eventually provided a bicycle for her. Unfortunately, that would be the last time she would ever be seen alive again. When Christine didn't make it home for dinner, her parents assumed that she was spending the evening at a friend's house. Far be it from me to question other people's parenting styles, but who the hell allows their child to just take it upon themselves to stay over at a friend's house for the evening? From what I've read, this was common for Christine to do. Hey, no need to ask me for permission, I'm just your parent. Almost a week later, the parents decide to notify the authorities of her disappearance. I feel pity for her parents, actually. I'm sure it was just a bad decision, but after something like this, the guilt must be eating them alive. Initially, the authorities treated this as if she were a runaway that would return home someday soon. This was until the bicycle that was loaned to Christine was found hidden behind an animal hospital a few blocks away from her home. Almost a month and a half later, on Christmas Day, a man walking his dog found the body of a child behind a trash dump. The authorities were notified and responded. The body was in a severe state of decomposition and covered in blood. Initial inspection of the body determined that the child could have been strangled to death. She was found with a belt fastened around her neck, extremely tight. This was until some of her clothing was rearranged and multiple stab wounds were found in the child's chest and abdomen. From what I've read, it could be inferred that the killer strangled her to death or unconscious first, then stabbed her multiple times to ensure that she died. Also, habitual runaways don't tend to have any regular patterns for authorities to follow, so the case was filed as unsolved. In April of 1981, a 13-year-old child by the name of Colleen Dagenalt, I hope I got the name right, just disappeared. Allegedly, she was on her way home and she was never seen alive again. No information was provided on the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, but the body was found located 5 months later in a nearby forest by hikers. Her body was totally decomposed, and the only thing left was her skeletal remains. I believe the authorities were unable to determine the cause of death due to this. Approximately 6 days after Colleen's disappearance, a 16-year-old child by the name of Darwin Todd Johnsrud. It was proven that he was abducted. His body was located 2 weeks later. No information was provided on the cause of death or the state that the body was found in, but the authorities were sure it was due to the same killer. Because these killings took place in isolated areas, no witnesses could be located. 3 weeks After the disappearance of Darwin, a 16-year-old child by the name of Sandra Wolfstein was abducted. 2 weeks after Sandra's disappearance, a 13-year-old by the name of Ada Anita Court had also been abducted. For the next 2 months, children and young adults were being abducted almost every other week. All of the bodies that the authorities located were found to have been either strangled, bludgeoned, or stabbed to death. Check this out. The authorities were able to confirm that it was the same killer that was involved with each murder, and more than likely the disappearances as well. They also believed that the killer worked alone. After the autopsy was done, the killer was found also to have assaulted both genders. On August the 12th, a man observed 2 young girls playing together with no supervision, in a manner that was not disclosed by the authorities, but the man attempted to abduct both children. Due to the disappearances and the killings being disseminated all over the local community and media, the children avoided being abducted and fled for help. The authorities were notified and they were able to identify Clifford Olson as the actor. He was eventually arrested and brought in for an interview. Clifford was linked to the death of a 14-year-old girl by the name of Judy Kozma. No information was provided on how the authorities were able to determine this, but during the interview, he confessed to the murder of Judy. Clifford initially denied responsibility for any of the other missing and murdered victims, I'm sure. Somehow he was able to get a plea agreement with the authorities that would provide him, check this out, with $10,000 for every murdered victim's body recovered. Before being paid any money, Clifford had to confess to all 11 murders and provide the location of at least one victim before being paid the initial installment. After pleading guilty, the authorities paid Clifford's wife $100,000 in total for his cooperation. I'm sorry, they should have took the money back and gave it to all his victims' family. Public outrage was overwhelmingly against rewarding a killer for murdering children. Clifford chose to provide the authorities with another offer of 20 more murdered victims for an additional $100,000. The authorities declined the offer. The nerve of this guy, they should have executed him on the spot for that alone. Clifford went to trial and was found guilty of 11 homicides. He was given 11 life sentences. When Clifford became a senior, he qualified for a pension while in prison. How nice. Clifford was able to receive a pension of an additional $1,100 a month. Public outcry started up against Clifford profiting from being a murderer with a life in prison sentence. After this, the government put a stop to his pension. They put a stop to his pension. They should have put a stop to his teeth. He should be eating from spoons for the rest of his life. If you enjoy more stories such as these, click on one of the suggested videos above. God bless and stay safe.